All right, so I just wanted to take the time, everybody, to speak about the relationship of the US dollar and that of gold and silver, because there has been a lot of turbulence, so to speak, more so bearish for the dollar over the past, really for the majority of 2017. And then sort of these massive oscillations that we're seeing in the price of gold and silver. Yes, it is not a perfect correlation. However, I just want to show you the importance of understanding what is going on with the US dollar and how that has a major effect short term on the price of commodities. So what has been happening again on the US dollar, just to recap, if I zoom out to the weekly chart, 2017 has been a tremendously bearish year for the US dollar. We more or less began the year at about 103 on the ETF itself. Here we are at the current juncture, back at about 93.64. At one particular point, it looked as though we were going to crack roughly 91, which would have been, a tremendously bearish macro sort of support area, which had been more or less cracked or completely destroyed. And if that was to be the case, we would have seen the bottom absolutely fall out of the US dollar. What has happened over the past 4 to 5 weeks is that we have strengthened. We have moved from about 91.31. You can see this little trigger down here. We've moved all the way back up to 93.64. I've been calling for the US dollar to strengthen really since we started drilling into this macro support over here at about $94, $93 on the ETF, or 94 at 93 on the ETF. Now, what is interesting to note is that if I go to the weekly chart and just show you this in terms of the RSI reading, we've been forming bullish divergence or positive divergence on the RSI. But, and this is the big caveat at the moment, we're still trying to decipher whether or not the US dollar has made a terminal trend reversal up here at about 103, or whether or not this is some form of a new decelerating fan line, i.e. another intermediate move, which is now going to sort of propel the big macro trend continuation of the breakout, which we saw back in the year 2014. As you can see on my screen over here, once we broke above this pivot at about 85, the US dollar has moved parabolically back up to about 100. It oscillated more or less sideways for pretty much 2 years until we made that sort of blow off top up here, just shy of 104. And once again, we're starting to see the US dollar move from a relatively oversold reading back into more so favorable conditions on larger fractals. This is the weekly chart. Now pay attention to this. The MACD is turning positive. Okay, the RSI is adjusting very quickly from extremely oversold conditions that we hadn't seen in a number of years. And the stochastics, you can see, it hasn't even budged whatsoever on the weekly time frame. We haven't even adjusted outside of those oversold parameters on my templates down here. So we've got some relatively bullish, I'd say, larger fractals on the weekly time frame, which does, of course, support and espouse that of higher prices for the US dollar. However, when we start and also continue the analysis of the actual candlesticks and the chart patterns themselves, this could also potentially be some form of a retest taking place at 93.50. So this support over here that I was paying very close attention to a number of months ago, it looks as though we have, of course, broken below it. And this bounce here, although we are correcting from oversold conditions and we're still toying with the idea, well, is this some form of a large downward trend, or is this the next sort of macro up leg for the US dollar? What this appears to be is potentially also a retest of this pivot. So if you just pay attention to my screen, I'll try and color coordinate this. This is red because potentially this is resistance. It was support. We've broken down below support. We've overshot support. We've moved into extremely oversold conditions because of this. Now we're adjusting. The oscillators are flipping bullish. However, it looks as though, once again, that we're retesting this pivot. This is what often happens when you break out of a macro resistance area. You get the retest of support, okay? But when you break down below macro support, it oftentimes becomes a new pivot for when we will retest it as new resistance. So the US dollar, so to speak, it is still 50-50. I can make a bullish argument very easily. I can also make a bearish argument probably a lot more easier. If I had to choose between, I guess at this particular point of the actual retest of this macro support and the simple fact that the oscillators are oversold and they're switching into a bullish alignment, I still rest and I still side with the actual support and resistance and the larger time frame, which has been in effect in terms of weekly candlestick construction since the year 2015. So at the moment, everyone's getting, again, very excited about the US dollar favorably, bullishly. Yes, actually, if you were in this, if you're trading UUP at 92.76, it is somewhat short-term profitable for you. But what I'm trying to explain to you right now is that this pivot here, right now, is going to have massive ramifications for the prices of, or the repricing of, gold and silver moving forward. what the US dollar does at this pivot. I mean, I don't like that color. Let me just change this color to something a little bit more sort of friendly on the eyes. I'm trying to make it a relatively neutral color, so to speak. Let's make it blue, all right? And I hope that doesn't really side with buying support, because it's not meant to, or this teal color here anyway. But what happens roughly in this area is going to set the tone for the US dollar as to whether or not this is going to be a rollover from this pivot and the continuation, the breakdown of this subsequent little swing low over here, or whether or not we're going to get back up above it, and this is going to be sort of that yearly low or low year to date, which may hold for a number of years moving forward. Now, obviously, as the US dollar has strengthened over the past month or so, you're seeing some pretty wild sort of repricings in gold and also silver. Gold went absolutely parabolic into the beginning of September, but really since, I guess the second week of September, really through the closing period of September, it has been an exceptionally bearish month for gold. If I go to the weekly chart, have a look at the weekly candlestick construction. You can see over here, this candlestick in particular, a massive upper wick retest of this pivot at 124, but you can see also to begin this week, we gapped down and we're still trading lower. So gold is obviously volatile. That's to do with the US dollar, but if the US dollar rolls at its current level and it starts to move bearish once again, you should see gold once again spike to the upside. But if the US dollar gains some traction in grit and it continues to advance, it continues to appreciate, I guess, in terms of purchasing power relative to that of gold, well, then you are going to see commodities continue to sell off. And if anything, 116 is a very, very realistic sort of expectation as to where that next macro area of support is for gold. Yes, you can pay attention to oversold, overbought conditions in gold and also silver, but really what is the main driver of these prices? Generally when, of course, the US dollar is either trending or moving sideways, is the actual nature of the US dollar. What is going on in the US dollar? When the US dollar is trending favorably or appreciating in price, it's generally bearish for commodities and vice versa. So you can see why there's a lot of chop, especially in the month of September. Again, this extends into silver, a very strong sort of endward period of August into the early weeks of, or early week of September. But since then, if I go to the monthly candlestick, you can see this is probably a better type of template. You can see again this upper wick and outside monthly candlestick. This is generally a reversal signal, and it sets the tone for a larger downward move on that relative sort of chart, or whatever you're applying it to, whatever you're actually looking at. If we bring up the same template of gold as well, you can see a big upper wick. This looks like a bearish piercing pattern. We've pierced at least halfway into the month of August, and we're starting the month of October, at least the first trading session of October, relatively bearish as well, down another 81 cents on the ETF. So I just wanted to point out the key to, of course, gold and silver at the moment is what is going on in the US dollar. The question becomes, is this some form of a dead cat bounce? Is this just some form of a snapback from oversold conditions in the US dollar? And are we going to come back up short term into these higher prices and then roll and continue the bearish trend? Or is this the macro bottom for the US dollar? Has this been sort of that massive correction that we've needed to see since 2014, since breaking out, that has just ended? And are we set to continue this big macro trend advance that has been in effect more or less since 2014? At the moment, we do not have enough information. But if we can reduce it down into sort of a very important level, for instance, on the US dollar, this is it on my screen right now. Pay attention to this. This is the moment of truth for the US dollar, and it's going to set the stage for gold and silver. At the moment, there is no really sort of fantastic or great trade on either or any of these, the US dollar, gold, or silver. But that's the beauty of financial markets. When you understand how to play technical analysis, you know when to sit out of these, and you know when is the right opportunity to leg into the positions based off, of course, the analysis of the technicals applied in the correct manner to the underlying investment vehicle that you're looking to chart as well. So I just wanted to make that very clear. As at really this pre-market update as we move into Tuesday's trading session, a lot at stake for the US dollar, gold, and also silver. And hopefully that's been some form of an explanation into some of these wild movements that we've seen in terms of price action as well. If you have any questions, email me, success@pivotpoint-trading.com. Enjoy your Tuesday, everybody. Right around the world, it's James signing off on behalf of Pivot Point Trading. All the best, everyone. Goodbye.